Hey, what's up guys? Chris here, back in another video. So it's been about 4 years, coming up quickly on 4 years since the GH5 has come out. In about 3 years, maybe a little less than 3 years, I think, since the GH5S has come out. So a few days ago, the rumor came out, and this is an FT5 on 43rumors.com, and I'll leave the link down below, of course. A new sensor, Micro Four Thirds sensor from Sony has been... I'm not sure if there's a patent for this. It doesn't really necessarily say, or if it's actually been, created. Like this is actually a thing. FT5, so it's confirmed, says new Sony MFT sensor records 8K video. 8K video. So let's get into this. So it says 8K video, and it's a 30 megapixel sensor for Micro Four Thirds, and it's a Micro Four Thirds sensor. So possibly the Gh6 might be coming out soon. That's quite interesting. It's been 4 years since that camera came out, and since then, when that camera came out back in 2017, it was, in my opinion, it was, for consumer level cameras, it was state of the art. It was the camera to buy, right? Especially for video, because you've got this 4K 60 sensor, which nobody else was doing at the time. It's still not that many cameras even have 4K 60, and this is 4 years later. The camera I'm shooting on here is the Sony A7C. It doesn't have 4K 60, and there's only, to my knowledge at this point, 2 consumer level cameras. Not even really necessarily consumer level cameras, because I don't necessarily look at the what is it called, either the A7S Mark III or the new Sony A1 to be considered really like consumer level cameras. Now they are in a sense, but they're obviously more expensive than, your average. I think a consumer level camera to me is, 2,000 and below. Personally, that's my personal opinion. Maybe that number is going to go up in the next couple of years when you look at like the Canon R6. Actually, maybe it's already gone up. Like you look at the Canon R6, potentially A7 IV might be up there in price as well. So, we're getting into that round. Maybe it's around $2,500 now is a consumer, and below. Anything above that, I think, is like more professional level. I think consumer level, I think I kind of like make as somebody like me who just enjoys using cameras. I'm not professional in any way, but that's not to say that I don't want to be. But anyways, it's been almost 4 years since we've had a GH5. The reason why it's been 4 years is because they made a camera that they didn't need to upgrade. They could maybe firmware upgrade here and there, fix the autofocus system. Obviously didn't have a very good autofocus system when it came out. Firmware update here and there, and that thing would withstand the test of time. Typically cameras, especially nowadays, don't necessarily last 4 years. The way technology is kind of like growing. So Sony's making this sensor. Obviously, they don't make Micro Four Thirds, but they do make a lot of different types of sensors, especially like pretty much all of your action cameras have Sony sensors in them. They make sensors for, I believe they make Nikon sensors. They make some Canon sensors. So they make some Fuji sensors as well. But I think it's about time that we come out with a new camera, because you see, the A1 coming out with 8K, the Canon R5 coming out with 8K, the A7S Mark III 4K 120 frames per second. So it might be time that the rest of the market is kind of catching up to the GH5 at this point, and I think that it might finally be time for them to upgrade this sensor and upgrade this camera. I'm hoping that because when the GH5 came out, 4K 60, it was around $2,000. Now you can get that thing for about $1,400, and it pretty much stays there if you go to B&H Photo or Adorama or any of these companies. Now you can pretty much get that camera for around $1,400. So it's an interesting time. I think that you're going to see a complete redesign of the body, and I think one of the major reasons we've waited this long is because to see this camera, because Panasonic and Sony have a unique situation going on, I think, because they're more of a tech company, and they have the money and the resources really to let their R&D truly develop before they release a camera. So when you look at a company like Canon, who, pretty much, their main source of income is cameras. They also do printers and some other things here and there, but for the most part, their main, you think of Canon, you think of, cameras, right? You think of Sony, you're thinking of PlayStations, you're thinking of headphones, you're thinking, I mean, there's so many things really before you're thinking of cameras, if you're not really into cameras, you know what I mean? Same with Panasonic. You're not necessarily thinking of cameras. You're thinking of, TVs and DVD players and stereo systems and, things of that nature. So they have the time to kind of put into R&D, So they're not going to build a sensor. They're not, and I'm sure they're working with Sony on this. They're not going to build a unfinished product. So I watched a video a while back saying that, they're worried about putting 8K in this camera and overheating and stuff like that. Panasonic is not going to put out a camera that's going to overheat. I can promise you that. Canon, on the other hand, they they have to keep up with the market in some ways. So when it comes to releasing a camera potentially early, that they kind of have to sometimes. So when the Canon R5 came out, it overheated like crazy. Everybody was complaining about it. I'm not really much of a Canon user, so I've had the RP in the past and a couple other small cameras, but I didn't really pay that much attention to them. I did, obviously, to the reviews and stuff like that because, every camera is interesting to me, but Canon, had obviously issues with overheating and stuff like that, whatever. But, I think they've kind of somewhat got it figured out now. They have some, cooler thing I heard, and I don't know. But I don't think Panasonic's going to come out with a camera that's going to overheat. And if they're going to have 8K, I'm kind of hoping that this is 8K sensor and they're just going to downsample to 6K and not kind of, beat up on their full frame systems. So, it all remains to be seen. And I'm just kind of speculating at this point and hoping that this is what we'll see. I'm hoping it's just downsampled 6K. 8K, kind of like, Sony does. This is a 6K video and it's downsampled to 4K. So I'm hoping that's what we'll see is an 8K downsampled to 6K because I don't think at this point in time that it's necessary to have all this stuff in a consumer level camera. I don't think 8K is quite there, but at the same time, Panasonic is going to put a camera out, especially in the Micro Four Thirds right now because they're kind of more focused on the full frame systems. I think Panasonic's going to put out a camera that is going to withstand the test of time. And I think about 4 or 5 years from now, everybody's going to have 8K in their cameras. Everybody's going to have at least 6K. 6K will be the industry standard in 4 years from now, for sure. So I think they're going to put up something out where they can kind of just set it and forget it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like what they did with the Gh6. That's not a bad thing. That's hey, let's put out a camera that will last, that 3 or 4 years from now, maybe even 5 years from now, will still be relevant. Because, if you're trying to get into YouTube right now, honestly, the Gh6 is still a good camera to start with. If you're trying to get into making videos, it's still a great camera to start with because it still has all the great features on it. It's a little bit cheaper now too. It's a little older, but it still is a great camera. But if this is the sensor for the Panasonic Gh6, that's going to be pretty awesome. I'm pretty happy with it. So anyways, that's about it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Later.